practice, mine and my wife's practice, for 32 years as realtors. We've been 32 years with Coldwell Banker, and the veteran world is our world. I'm retired Air Force, and I'm a former or past honorary squadron commander for the 21st Fighter Squadron at Luke Air Force Base. That's a squadron from Taiwan. Luke trains the Taiwan Air Force. So that's a little bit about my background. And I'm going to jump right into our presentation today. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully it'll come up. And Alicia, let me know if it shows up to everybody. I hope it does.
I see it coming.
You got it?
Yep.
Good. All right. So what I'm going to cover today is about the VA loan and the Blue Water Navy bill. A lot of people don't really understand what all of that nonsense is about. Of course, many of you have probably already heard that there's no more VA loan guarantee cap for sorry, turn my phone off, my mic off. VA home loan. The Blue Water bill. So what is it and what did it do for veterans? Well, today you're going to learn just how influential VAREP is on Capitol Hill. Now, VAREP is the only professional real estate trade organization with a direct understanding of the need to increase sustainable home ownership, financial literacy education, VA loan awareness, and economic opportunity for the active duty, military, and veteran community. No veteran service organization, VSO, even comes close to the skill set of the members of VAREP. And I'm not going to do the Pledge of Allegiance because we normally do this live, so I will pass on that. But I do need to read a disclaimer. It's important, it's legal stuff, we got to get it out of the way. So the information presented in this presentation may include facts, views, or opinions of individuals or organizations not affiliated with VAREP. VAREP does not endorse, guarantee, or warrant the accuracy, completeness, or timeliness of the facts, views, or opinions. Sounds like somebody from Congress, doesn't it? VAREP specifically disclaims any and all liability for any claims or damages that may result from acts or from facts, views, or opinions of individuals or organizations not affiliated with VAREP. Additionally, some information in the presentation are VAREP's opinions, views, and recommendations. VAREP encourages members to seek clarification with local, state, and federal real estate law where appropriate, and experts where appropriate, and will not be liable for any of our opinions, views, or recommendations. Our intent is to share our experience. However, it is up to the real estate practitioner to seek legal advice for real estate related matters. Now I got that out of the way. Let's dig in. All right. So the Blue Water Navy bill, it was signed into law. It is now Public Law 1623. You can look it up on the internet. And the reason that I decided to put this together, I am the person, I am that veteran that pulled the alarm to plan the funding, plan to fund Blue Water Navy. I'm going to put something here up in the chat window and you can read it later, but this is an article that was written that launched a lot of pissed off emotions in Congress when I first came across this problem. So before we get too far along, you should know that in June 2018, the House Veterans Affairs Committee planned to pay for the bill to extend care to our Navy sailors who were infected with Agent Orange. There were about 90,000 Blue Water Navy veterans of the Vietnam War. And what the Congress thought they would do was, in order to pay for this care, for these veterans who've been fighting for this coverage, this care by the VA, been fighting for this for 40 years, 4 decades. They tried to get Congress to agree that a sailor who was on ship and never went ashore in Vietnam did in fact get infected from Agent Orange. It was a chemical that was being used in Vietnam. The VA was pushing back, saying if you never went ashore, you couldn't have been infected by Agent Orange. It's important that you understand the background of the bill, and we'll get into some of this other stuff. The reason the Navy vets on board were infected, as the chemical was being sprayed throughout the jungle, it would get into the tributaries and the rivers, which would leach back out into the ocean, where the ships were anchored offshore, bringing up water, desalinizing it, and using it for regular bathing, washing, anything you would use water for. So all the troops on those ships did in fact get infected by Agent Orange. 40 years later, finally, there was a bill put together that was going to help these 90,000 Blue Water Navy vets get their care. However, in Congress, there's a process called you got to pay for the bill that you're trying to pass. In this case, we needed to get these guys and gals covered, and there wasn't any money to do it. So what happened? Congress decided they would tap the VA loan as the source of funds to fund that Blue Water Navy health care. When they made that decision, they thought, well, let's do this. Let's raise the funding fee from what it was to what it is today now. And let's do one more thing, when this is what really set my hair on fire. Let's take away the VA funding fee waiver from anybody who is not 100% disabled. The reason that pissed me off was I'm disabled. I'm 60% disabled. There are guys and gals in theater who have been blown up by an IED, who lost a limb, and they are not 100% disabled. That means that those folks coming back wanting to use their VA loan and apply for a loan and be eligible, today they're eligible for a funding fee waiver, VA funding fee waiver, would not have been eligible for the funding fee waiver. Additionally, and by mistake, the staffer whom I know, when he wrote the language for the VA bill, he accidentally miswrote the bill, the language, in a way that would have eliminated what we all know. Those of you that are lenders and those of you that do a lot of VA loans, there's a component of the VA loan called remainder entitlement. And the bill, the language was written such that remainder entitlement would have been expunged. It would have been gone. So I was contacted by the Military Times, a reporter by name of Tom Philpott. He interviewed me, and I told him, I said, I honestly didn't start to create hell and hate and discontent in the world. However, I told him I felt compelled to speak out because when Congress is going after veterans to pay for the service of another veteran, that was wrong, in my opinion. I told him no disabled veteran, or excuse me, Representative Rowe, Congressman Rowe said no disabled veteran would be impacted by higher loan fees. That was an absolute falsehood. And so I flew to Washington, raised all kinds of hell, and we were off and running. So I want to give you a little background quick on the VA loan and help you understand how we got to where we are today. Understand that the organization I represent represents veterans and veterans benefits. So from the beginning, in the English colonies in North America provided pensions for disabled veterans. The first law in the colonies on pensions was enacted in 1636 by the Plymouth Settlement. And they provided money to those disabled in the colonies' defense against the Indians. Other colonies followed Plymouth's examples. Matter of fact, in the beginning of the American dream, which was owning a home, was actually birthed in 1775. Matter of fact, between 1775 and 1855, when the federal government provided bounty land for those who served in the Revolutionary War of 1812, and the Mexican War and the Indian Wars. So it was first offered as an incentive to serve in the military, and later as a reward for their service. The earliest legislation for soldiers involving land was passed by the Continental Congress in 1776. They promised public lands to officers and soldiers. Here's kind of a fun factoid. Colonels were granted 500 acres. Lieutenant colonels got 450 acres. Majors received 400 acres, captains 300 acres, lieutenants 200 acres, all the way down to the enlisted guy who got 100 acres. So that was kind of cool. That's how we actually got started on this. Now, ultimately, this policy became unsustainable. Thus, the veterans of the War of 1812, Congress promised land bounties for services in the Army of the United States during the war with Great Britain. Now, bounty lands could have been claimed by veterans or their heirs. Now, the federal government reserved tracts of lands, and you can see it in this little map here, in the public domain for this purpose. Now, the state of New York and Pennsylvania and Virginia also set aside some lands, and these bounties were being handed out to our soldiers. Now, if the applicant was approved, the individual was given either a warrant to receive the land or scrip that he could exchange for a warrant. Now, later, the laws allowed for the sale or exchange of those lands. So that's kind of a little background of what happened. Of course, you all know, fast forward to the creation of the Veteran Administration by President Hoover. President Hoover signed an executive order that actually established the VA in July of 1930. During World War II, public sentiment grew to help World War II veterans who were returning to civilian life. Now, Congress responded in 1944 with the Servicemen's Readjustment Act. Y'all know it as the GI Bill of Rights. Now, that bill, which dramatically transformed the concept of the veterans benefits, was signed into law by President Roosevelt on June 22nd. So, officially titled the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, the GI Bill offered veterans 1 year of employment pay after their homecoming, guarantees for loans to purchase homes, guarantees for loans to start or buy farms. Remember, this is back in when World War II was ending or had ended, and tuition and living stipends for college and vocational programs. However, the entrepreneurial spirit of the returning servicemen actually prompted many of them to start their own businesses, primarily, believe it or not, taxi cabs. They became taxi cab owners. Here's a fun factoid. A lot of you have heard the term GI. So did you know that GI was a nickname for soldiers that was derived from, and there's a controversy, was it government issue or general issue, but essentially the uniforms which were issued by the government, GI. So GI are the initials used to describe the soldiers of the United States Army and Airmen of the United States and Air Force, and for general items that they were given. The term GI has been used as an initial identifier for government issue or general issue. Now, here's some more interesting factoids. Now getting on to our VA loan and what we've ended up doing with the VA loan. And some of the history you need to understand. In 2015, the VA closed 131 loans, totaling 153,469, right? That is 153 billion, that's 153,469,474,425 closed dollars in 2015. That's a lot of money. So in the following example that we've got here, in 2018, the VA closed 610 loans for $161 billion. Notice the average sale amount. This is nationally. It was 264,000 back then. And then the jumbo loans accounted for less than 5% of all these loans. Why is that important? So let's get to it. The VA rep was aware that the Blue Water bill was extremely, and we were extremely supportive of it, particularly because it was going to help those sailors who had been fighting for over 4 decades for benefits to take care of their medical needs caused by Agent Orange. And I mentioned that June of 2018, I flew to Washington and spoke with staffers about the way they had structured the pay for. Well, the plan was to change the VA loan product in a way that would destroy the VA loan by disguising those changes around a benefit of eliminating the VA loan guarantee cap. Now, removing the VA loan guarantee cap would mean that any loan that exceeded the Fannie Mae Freddie Mac conforming loan limit today, I believe it's 510 something, might be up to 530 something, changes almost hourly anymore, but would be granted to a qualified veteran borrower who, with no need to supplement his or her VA purchase with a down payment of 25% of the difference between the purchasing amount and the conforming loan limit. Now, VA rep had been working on that project since 2012, and we were extremely supportive of making that change. However, VA rep was not supportive of that change at the expense of any veteran. In fact, at the time, he's now Congressman Walz of Minnesota. He's got a job ahead of him, doesn't he? But he was Representative Congressman, I'm sorry, he's Governor Walz now in Minnesota, but he was Congressman Walz then. He said something that was extremely poignant. He said, "It is bad policy to take from one group of veterans to pay for another group." He said, "I think this is the time for us to say, no, this money isn't coming from other veterans' benefits." And we were very, very supportive of that. The major changes that were in the first iteration of the bill of 2018 would have removed the funding fee waiver for all veterans who did not have 100% rated disability if the veteran wanted to take advantage of that no cap guarantee loan. That was a problem for us. The original language actually said, this is the language that we stopped, that VA rep stopped. "A fee shall be collected under this section." This is the bill. This is the language that was going to become law. "A fee shall be collected under this section from any veteran with a service-connected injury disability rated at less than 100%. So our troop that got blown up and lost a limb was now going to be, it was going to be ineligible for that funding fee waiver. This is the actual, this is a screenshot of the actual legislation that we stopped. I will tell you, this bill put together this way had actually made its way through the House, passed nearly unanimously. This provision, number 3, was inserted into the bill while they were voting on the bill. In other words, many, if not most of those in Congress who voted to pass this bill in the House in 2018 didn't even know this was happening. The other thing that was going to happen, they would eliminate the use and availability of the remainder entitlement provision of the VA loan. And all of those changes were poised to make all veterans dance to the whim of Congress. I was pretty ticked off. I was extremely ticked off, as a matter of fact. And then there was a small increase in the funding fee schedule. We didn't have a problem with the funding fee increase, and I'll tell you why. The funding fee had not been touched, had not been changed since 2004. Understand, this was 2018. The funding fee itself had not been increased at all. There was no cost of living increase that had been assigned to that element of the VA loan. So raising the funding fee nominally was not a problem. There was an increase where they were going to raise the fee from 2.15% for a first-time user to 2.4%, and from 3.25% to 3.8%. We thought 3.8% was a little heavy-handed. But here was the real important part. The CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office, they had to score the bill. You know, this money that you're going to collect in the pay for section of the bill, Congress, is it going to be enough money for you to do what you want to do, which is pay for the medical care of those 90,000 Navy veterans? Well, this is what CBO said. The additional fee income from those two sources, raising the VA funding fee and charging the funding fee, changing the funding fee to veterans with less than 100% rating, would reduce the direct spending by an amount that would be, and this was the key part, more than offset the guarantees that they were going to be paying. Why was that important? The CBO told Congress, hey, you guys are collecting more dough than you need. And that also set my hair on fire. First, you have to need to understand the concept of the offset, or what's called the pay for in the legislative space. The term pay for means when a bill is introduced into the regulatory legislative arena, if the bill being introduced is projected to increase either the federal deficit or the national federal debt, that bill must be paid for by offset. The cost of that bill must by reducing the cost of some other federal program. Where are you going to get that money? Well, they figured they would get it from the VA loan. In the case of the Blue Water Navy bill, Congress argued that the best place to find those funds for the Blue Water bill was to take those funds from the VA loan program. And obviously that didn't set well with many members of Congress or the VA. Thus, the plan was hatched to find a way to use the VA loan platform to fund Blue Water. That really ticked us off. So the plan that evolved was to raise the funding fee, as I said, from 3.2 or 2.15 to 2.4, and from 3.25 to 3.8%. Additionally, by removing the funding fee waiver from those who were less than 100% disabled, anybody that wanted to use that jumbo loan. We saw that as a slippery slope, because if we let them, Congress, touch the funding fee waiver for that group, they would ultimately weigh that change into the normal path of the VA loan, and we needed to stop that. Our argument was this, that 88% of all rated veterans are rated at less than 100%. So 88% of us are rated with a disability of less than 100%. That was very important for us to explain to Congress. 12% of all rated veterans are rated at 100%, but less than 4.5% of all loans closed in 2017 were jumbo loans. Why is that important? And why you need to understand why we push back on this. by taking away the funding fee waiver exemption from those of us who were less than 100% disabled, if we wanted to go into that jumbo loan arena, the amount of money that Congress was going to collect for that effort was going to be 0.018% of the overall total number of closed loans. So I launched a national legislative committee, and we launched a full-on offensive to stop the 2018 version of what was then known as HR 299. I flew to Washington. I met with members of Congress in the Senate and the House. I met with then Congresswoman Kirsten Sinema, and we successfully gathered additional support from NAR, from the Mortgage Bankers Association, from the National Association of Mortgage Bankers, and from the National Credit Union Association, and many others, to stop that bill from advancing to the Senate. And the offensive was successful because we killed that bill in 2015. It did not advance. Mission accomplished. So VAREP led the way to make certain that what ultimately became HR 299, the Blue Water Navy bill, would pass, but it would not destroy the VA loan product. When the 116th Congress was sworn in on January 3rd in 2019, HR 299 was waiting in the chute to be reintroduced. VAREP worked diligently and successfully to fix all the mess that the first version of the bill had heaped upon the users of the VA loan product. The 115th Congress version was poised to literally destroy the VA loan product. So HR 299 was reintroduced in the House on January 8th and was immediately referred to the House, and it ultimately got signed into law in 2019. That bill is now the law of the land in June. This is what the new bill actually said, that there will be, this section, we took out the part that said they were going to take away our funding fee. But more importantly, and this is something we're really, really proud of, and those of you that don't know this, keep this in mind. As you know, the funding fee waiver is available to service members who have separated and have a disability, a rated disability. Part of the myth about the rated disability is that you have to have some percentage. You have to be 10% or 5% or 20% disabled. That is a myth. That is absolutely not correct. The veteran simply has to have a disability and be receiving a stipend from the VA of any size. Could be 1%, although there aren't any 1% disabled veterans. My point is, don't ever tell a veteran or ask a veteran, are you 10% disabled? It doesn't matter. If he or she has a rated disability, they are eligible for the funding fee waiver. But what we are very proud of is we actually added a piece to this legislation. And a service member who has received the Purple Heart and is still serving on active duty is eligible for a funding fee waiver. So if you're working with a service member who's on active duty, the first question out of your mouth is, have you ever received the Purple Heart? Because if he or she has, they are eligible for the funding fee waiver. Do not simply assume that because they're on active duty, there's no funding fee waiver out there. Because if they've received that Purple Heart, they're eligible for it. And that is something that VAREP championed, and we're really proud of that. So here's the piece about the Purple Heart. This is something that we did. And the other thing that we're really proud of, our Native Americans are eligible for all of these VA benefits, but they're only eligible when it's prescribed by law. We made it a concerted effort to make sure that the law was amended to include our Native American veteran brothers and sisters. That's something else that VAREP did. I'll pass on this one. Tinkering with the funding fee, like I said, was something that we were really focused on. And remember, I told you that there was a plan to increase the funding fee waiver for multi-time users up to 3.8%. We pushed that down and it's now 3.6%. And the funding fee waiver is shared in kind across all matters of military people, whether they're reservist, a guard, or active duty. And the coup de grace, this was the coup de grace, and that was that we got rid of the guarantee cap. Today, there is no ceiling on the guarantee that the VA will put on a loan. So that doctor or lawyer or nurse that you're working with who wants to buy that $550,000 or $600,000 home, previously they would have had to come up with 25% of the difference of the purchase amount and the conforming loan limit. Today, they do not have to come up with that limit. They can actually make that purchase with no money down. You've got a doctor or a lawyer who's looking in at $1 million home or a $2 million home. They don't have to come up with money down to support 25% of the difference between the conforming loan limit and that $1 million purchase. The VA currently is already processing multi-million dollar no money down loans. And think about this, if that veteran doctor has a qualified disability, he can make, and if he can qualify for the mortgage, he can make that, he or she can make that purchase of that $1 million home with no money down. Think about it. If they were doing this with a conventional loan, they'd have to put 20% down to avoid MI. There's no MI, no mortgage insurance. How crazy is that? And if they've got a qualifying disability, they don't have a funding fee either. That's insane, but this opens an entirely new world to all of us who are in this business. Now, some lenders have overlays that will suppress how much money they will actually process a jumbo loan for. I've heard some lenders that won't go over $1 million, $1.2 million, but I will tell you, the VA has no ceiling. If you have a $10 million or $100 million house, the VA doesn't care. The borrower qualifies for it, they're going to be able to sell that to Ginnie Mae, and Ginnie Mae is going to buy it. So this is, again, just the balance of that bill. I wanted to just show you that we, VA reps, stepped in to make sure we push this through. One last thing that we did, I did talk about, we rescued the remainder entitlement piece. I might touch on that in a minute, but here's the other thing that we did that's just really cool. Many times you'll hear that the VA can't get to my loan, my deal for, I don't know, a week or so. Well, the VA heard that, and we pressed into Congress a provision where the VA appraiser can hire another VA appraiser to go take the pictures, drive the property, take the comp pictures, do all of that outside legwork, measure the property, and let the appraiser, assigned appraiser, to remain home or in his office doing his or her job. That is now been released to the appraisal industry. All of the VA appraisers have the authority to do this. So if they get bogged down and they can't make a drive out to the middle of Buckeye or Tullison or Tonopah, they can ask another VA appraiser who's got some time on his or her hand, go out and do that work. The VA appraiser making that request would pay that appraiser to do that work and bring that work back. And the appraiser who's been assigned is still the responsible appraiser for that job. But this has really expanded the flexibility of the VA appraiser, and it has reduced turn times. If ever, I will tell you this, folks, if ever you have a situation where you're running into a lag time that is unacceptable to you in turn time of an appraisal, please reach out to me. My contact information, Alicia's got it. I'll put it up here on the screen in a minute. But please reach out to me because I can help you navigate whatever waters is churning up, causing that delay. The other thing is, remember that I do another class called Tidewater. I teach a Tidewater class, how to actually complete a Tidewater submission, because it's very detailed. It is more than just handing out MLS printouts to an appraiser. That'll piss them off in a minute. So I do a Tidewater, but what I want to tell you is every time you take a listing, if there is a possibility that you think your appraisal could be on the bubble, you should begin your Tidewater response preparation immediately so that when you receive your Tidewater, which is an opportunity to have a do-over before you need a do-over, you'll be prepared. So just keep in mind of that. And also remember, in every instance, in 1,000,000% of every instance, the appraiser's information is available to you as the real estate agent or lender. The lender's been given instructions to advise the real estate agents, buyer or seller, or whoever's been put on that authorization sheet, it's called the Webley, to give that appraiser's contact information to the agent so that you can begin a dialogue with that appraiser. You are allowed to talk to the appraiser. And I'm going to put one more thing up here. We'll pull that later. And so I'm about done. Alicia, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and field them here.
Yeah, can you really quick just explain Tidewater? Because not everyone is familiar with that term.
Sure. So Tidewater is a scenario where the appraiser is given a job. He does some preliminary work. He looks in the computer, he looks in the tax records, and he scratches his head and he says, I don't know what these folks were smoking, but I don't see the number. I don't see how they agreed to this sales price. I got to ask them for some help. The appraiser will then send a notice to the lender saying, I need to give you a Tidewater notice. Tidewater, the term Tidewater comes from the low-lying areas in Virginia where the program was actually beta tested back in 2000s, early 2000s. But the lender will receive an email from the appraiser saying, I'm giving you a Tidewater notice. Literally, that's the appraiser saying, don't know what you guys are smoking, help me out here. And then the lender's job, his responsibility, his or her responsibility, is to send that notice immediately to the agents. Hopefully both agents were put on that authorized contact list. The lender, when you take a listing and when you go to contract, you should make it a point to reach out to your lender and tell the lender, I want you to tell your person who's ordering the appraisal to add me and the other agent as people to contact. You as a real estate agent have that right, and the lender has that authority to make notice to the VA, hey, I'm letting you know that John, the listing agent, and Mary, the selling agent, are both points of contact for this transaction. That way, if there is a Tidewater notice, when the lender gets it, he can send it out to both realtors at the same time and say, hey guys, put away your bong pipe, find out what happened here. And now you begin your Tidewater process. But again, the Tidewater response is very, very complex. It's not what realtors do in a normal setting. And I'd be happy, Alicia, at a later date to come back and teach that.
Awesome. Does anyone have any other questions that, anything he didn't address and you didn't type in the chat yet? All right. Well, G2, that must mean you did a great job explaining things if nobody has any questions right now. And we are pretty much exactly on time for our 12 o'clock finish. So what I am going to say before we log out is, thank you for logging in today. I appreciate it. I know some of you maybe worked through some glitches to get on here. So really appreciate you working through it and getting on it. I want to, thank you, G2, very much for sharing your time, talent, knowledge with us. And for the realtors on here, I did put G2's contact information in the chat, and you can copy and paste it from there. However, if you don't and later on you want it, feel free to reach out to me at any time. And like I always say in all my classes, if you're a realtor on here and you found value, the best way to show us you found value is to partner with one of our People's Mortgage loan originators, and let's start working on some buyers together. I'm so excited about having this knowledge and knowing that our veterans are not going to have to put any money down no matter what the price of the house is. That's like super awesome news, and I think it's super exciting. Anyways, and I want to thank you, G2, for doing everything that you have done to fight to make this happen, because
Julie,
I know it's not an easy feat.
it looks like Julie might have a question.
No?
Says,
Okay.
does anybody have questions? And she says, I do. Is that like she's marrying me?
Oh, I think, no, because I asked if everybody knew what Tidewater meant. And I think she was saying she does know what Tidewater means.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So, all right, awesome. We are going to put out a survey from SurveyMonkey. So if you guys can please fill that out, give us some feedback. And one of the questions on there is going to be, would you be interested in the Tidewater class, so that we can get that on the books. And again, thanks so much for your time, G2. And I hope everyone has an absolutely amazing weekend.
You too, guys. Stay safe, everybody. Wear your mask. Bye.